All right, welcome back to video number 3. Thank you for sticking with us through video number 1 when we talked about the strategies we employ to help your business get found online, both through local search, organic, local SEO, Google Maps optimization, and through paid advertising through Google, Bing, and Facebook. The getting traffic, getting visitors, getting eyeballs to your website, that again is step number 1, so critical. Lots of ways we can do that. But really is the essence of getting your online campaign started off properly, and a combination of those strategies holistically is what we employ when we're working with our clients. Step 2 in video 2, we talked about generating leads. I spent a good amount of time talking to you a little bit about the Iceberg Theory and how your visitors are in one of 3 modes when they're shopping online. They're in the research stage, they're in the comparison stage, or they're in the buying stage, and that one of the biggest mistakes that we find business owners make is they spend so much time chasing the buyer that's ready to convert today. And yet that world is so competitive. But there's such a huge opportunity when you think about the iceberg theory of the majority of your customers searching the web for information and comparative information, and they're trying to answer questions in their mind, and they're trying to decide what it is that they should do. They're trying to get the basic rudimentary information for whether or not they're going to purchase your product or service now or in the future. And your ability to generate leads and really enter yourself into that conversation is a critical component to your online success. And how we build what we call sales funnels or lead generation funnels on your website to speak to that audience, whether your audience is buying in the next 3 days or whether they're buying in 5 years. These are the processes that I learned roughly 10 years ago that turned my business around, that carried me through 2008, 2009, and 2010 when the market was in pretty much a collapse. And that's what's going to work for your business today. Our company spends a considerable amount of time on not just what we talked about in video 2, but what we talk about today and in this video, in video number 3, which is how to increase sales. Now, I often am challenged by business owners that when they see that we talk about increasing sales, and really how does Yokology do that? Because we don't pick up the phone for you and call your customers for you. We don't work inside your office and field incoming calls. But there are some things that are critical that we do help you with, and that what we do after your leads are generated in your sales funnel, how we build a consistent, leveraged, automatic follow-up system that helps nurture those leads until they're ready to buy. Let me give you a few examples. One of our clients, their average sales cycle is 5 years. If you can imagine that, 5 years before that person typically, on average, buys. Now, there's another company we work with, and their average sales cycle could be 6 to 12 months. We have some companies where they work in emergency service businesses that, for instance, let's say plumbing, for example. If I walk home and walk in my garage and my water heater has busted and I've got water spraying everywhere, my sales cycle is minutes. There are other scenarios where perhaps I get in a car accident and maybe I'm not sure I need an attorney, but over the next 24 to 72 hours, I'm going to decide, hey, I think there's been an injury here, or maybe I need to pursue this at a different level legally, and I may reach out to a personal injury attorney. It really doesn't matter what the sales cycle is for your business, for your customers, but you must understand that there is one. So today we're going to talk about increasing sales and how a proper lead nurturing campaign, and I'm not talking about a newsletter, I'm not talking about a monthly newsletter, I'm not talking about coupons, I'm not talking about sending them text messages weekly to let them know you've got a special from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. I'm not talking about sale material. I'm talking about long-term lead nurturing. I'm talking about how do you communicate and set yourself apart from your competitors. Remember, we talked in video number 1 about the race car. How is it that you, if you're driving a Porsche, could beat a NASCAR race car? Well, out of the gate you can't. But if we're working with you in a way that your competitors aren't, I hear a lot of times with small, medium-sized business owners, they see their competitors with loads and loads of money, maybe outbidding them in ads and pretty much blasting their business all over the web, all over the television, and all over radio and newspapers, and they think as a small business they can't compete, or a medium-sized business they can't compete. And we're here to tell you, you absolutely can compete, because at the end of the day, if you're implementing what we said before, which is a system that gets into your customers' minds and answers their questions, and you're able to exchange an email address with those visitors, then now you can build a long-term sales funnel by lead nurturing them through the process of their thought process. Now, so the 4 steps that we're going to talk about here in this particular video, we're going to talk about lead nurturing, copywriting. Once again, copywriting. Copywriting, again, is just kind of a fancy word or an industry term for us. It talks about text, it talks about language, it talks about information, and how do we build email sequences that keep in touch with your clients over that sales cycle, that, you know, where you can go do what you do best, servicing your current customers, while this machine is working by itself on autopilot, or should I say, you know, on our behalf. We're working for you guys on autopilot. Number 3, how do we set up an automated email follow-up sequence? And then number 4, how do we establish what we call calls to action? You know, there are different calls to action depending on the type of business you're in. So let's dive into each one of these really quick and explain what they are, how they work, and why they're so important. So for the example of this particular video, let's omit the idea that you're an emergency service business for just a minute. I'm going to come back to that at the end, but let's pretend for this moment your sales cycle is 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, or maybe even longer than that. So once they've given you their email address for the value that you provided in step 2 that we would have worked with you to set up, what you're needing to do now is continue the conversation. You need to continue the conversation, but you don't need to continue it by phone. You don't need to make sure you're touching out with them one by one. You're going to do that digitally through an email follow-up campaign, one that answers questions, one that provides value, one that stays in front of them in a non-intrusive, non-salesy way that continues to elevate their perception of you as an industry expert at what you do. This is what we talk about when we say copywriting. So we work together with you in terms of how do you communicate to your customers. We expand on those questions that they're asking you in your conversations, in your meetings, in your consultations, and we build what's called an automated email follow-up sequence. Now that sequence can be 3 or 4 emails, that sequence could be 8 emails, that sequence, if your sales cycle is really, really long, it could be 10, 20, 30 emails, and we may develop this over a period of time. We don't have to do it all right out of the gate, but we're developing a conversation that can keep your name in front of your potential customer, because remember, they selected several websites when they found you online. And so we oftentimes say that even if they found you on the first page of Google, even if they've clicked and honored you with a visit to your website, you have to believe that they went to other websites. So the person who does this the best, the company who does this the best, is typically going to win the business. Now, if they were in buying mode that day and they just called and were shopping prices and were looking for the lowest bidder, then of course maybe they've gotten their service and they're gone. But the person who exchanges an email address with you, they were in the research and comparison stage. That means their buying decision is yet to be made, and your job now is to earn the buying decision. Your job now is to earn the sale, which is whether you're going to reach to a point where they're going to pick up the phone and call you. You're going to get to a point where they're going to email you and say, hey, can you give us a call? We're ready to do the service. And what you're going to find if you do this properly is they will be less likely to drill down and price shop you like everyone else. So there's a difference when a person is in the research and comparison mode. They want a good deal, don't get me wrong, but they're going to be less likely to be saying, well, I'm going to call 5 or 6 or 8 companies and get the best price. They're just going to be less likely. That's been our experience. That's been my experience in the years and years that I've been practicing this, and that's what we believe will be yours. So what does a lead nurturing campaign look like? Let's pretend for just a moment we're talking about someone at the very top of the sales funnel, someone who was just researching information. Maybe they weren't expecting to buy anything for 6 to 12 months, and they ended up inside of your lead generation campaign. Whatever that campaign was, I can't use a specific example here, but let's pretend it was a campaign that was designed at the research stage of the sales funnel. What we're doing then is we're giving them valuable information and tips and resources in these emails that you and I, our team, we sit down with you and we get this information out on paper, and then we design this campaign so that we drip on them at an appropriate time. Now, this is so critical because if we are simply email blasting them and offer to buy something, then they are going to simply unsubscribe and they're never going to come back to your website. So the key is, number one, getting these emails opened, and we have a tremendously high success rate with getting 50, 60, 70% sometimes of our emails opened on behalf of our clients. Number two, getting them not to unsubscribe. Everyone knows that they're in their email inbox. I'm sure you know as well that your email inbox is bombarded with solicitations and advertisements and junk mail, and obviously your important mail is there as well. So the minute you can get rid of someone who's being an annoying pest, you're likely to click the unsubscribe button. So the key here is making sure that your prospects do not click the unsubscribe button. The third thing is we want to make sure that they do something. We call it step number 4, call to action. Maybe you want them to click on a link inside your email and come back to your website and read a blog post. Maybe you want them to come check out an FAQ video, a frequently asked question video. Maybe you're going to send them over to a resource on your Facebook page. Maybe you're going to send them to a third-party resource article from maybe you had a press release on your company for some accomplishment that your company was awarded, and you're going to send them to read a press release. So the call to action in the email isn't always just to, hey, call me so you can buy, call me so you can place your order, call me to schedule your consultation. Many times you're just wanting that prospective customer to take an action based on the information provided in the email, so they can come back to your website, they can engage with you more, they can read more information, so that it builds more trust and influence in their mind. So this is really the simplicity of increasing sales. And when done properly, when you've done this properly, you're going to find that people are going to get to a point where their fears are reduced, their hesitations are removed, the roadblocks, the stumbling blocks, whatever was keeping them from making the buying decision. Or in some cases, it's just time, right? You can't move the timing of when a buyer is going to be ready. You just have to be there when they're ready. And I'll say that again. You can't, change or alter the timing of when someone's going to be ready to buy. You just have to be there when they're ready. Now that may be 6 months, it may be 12 months, and this is where a lot of business owners miss out on exponential growth in their business online, because they only want those now buyers, those buyers who are above the water, where above where you can see the tip of the iceberg. They want those buyers. Well, I'm telling you, the majority of your exponential growth in your online business campaigns will come from those buyers who have not yet identified themselves, but they have participated in this online sales sequence and this digital sales sequence. Now let me go address the emergency service businesses and talk about a couple of ways that we employ this with service businesses that have very, very short term, or what I like to call emergency sales cycles. Typically speaking, when a service company has an emergency service product, let me give an example. Maybe personal injury attorneys have an emergency. If you're maybe locked in jail and you need a bail bonds, to get out of jail. If you are perhaps a plumbing example, where maybe you come home and find out your house is flooded from a pipe bursting or a water heater exploding, or something along that line where you need absolute emergency service. Typically what can happen is individuals will go to the web and they will literally want to search for the top 3 searches, or the top 1 or 2 listings on the page. And again, you may or may not be in that top 3 listing, but let's assume that you are. What can happen still is no one's going to just call one provider and just call that one provider out because it was the number 1 listing on Google or Bing or what have you. What they are likely to do is call 2 or 3 really, really quick, and they're likely to get talk to 1 or 2, and they're not going to waste much time because they have an emergency. They have to get this thing solved right away. So the way lead capture can work in this example, especially if you're using, obviously you want the telephone call. We're not trying to alter the telephone call. We want that telephone call, which is why paid advertising works so well, especially when we implement that with emergency service phrases, because we want that telephone call to come in. But even in a situation where maybe it's not quite a flood in the house, but it's something that's relatively urgent, we talk about using the contact page when someone is filling out maybe a request for a quote, and really optimizing what we call a short-term lead follow-up sequence. And that simply is this. If someone were to fill out a form on your website for an emergency type service or a short-term turnaround service, the best thing you can do is include a thank you message that includes a video or an expected sales process or an expected follow-up process on the thank you page. It's just a great avenue to pick up extra opportunities that your competitors wouldn't do. We work with a lot of service companies, and unfortunately, a lot of times their phones go to voicemail, and I hope this isn't the case for you. And if it is, we have to definitely work on it, because visitors that come from the web will not leave messages typically. If they call your business and they're not talking to a live individual, they're typically not going to leave a message waiting for a return call. They're just going to call the next vendor. So what we like to talk about is how can you, if you're not able to answer the phone, if it's after hours, how do you orchestrate 24 hours someone picking up the phone, or someone on the web, or a process on the web where they know that 24 hours a day they're going to get immediate service. Maybe once someone fills out a form, it's going to shoot out an instant text message to the available service technician or something of that nature. But being able to communicate that through your website is a way to enhance your emergency service conversion rates. And so I'm not going to go too much further in that, because every business has different emergency service type needs if you have emergency services. But for the most part, when we're talking about increasing sales, we're talking about amplifying the messaging and reducing the fears and hesitations that your potential customers have once they've transitioned and given you their information. Now, there's another way that we don't talk about too much in this video, but when they call your office, let's say they call your office and they're still not ready to buy yet, and that is how we help build a lead nurturing and sales follow-up message campaign once they've called your office, and you can actually input them into a sequence that we're talking about here. So I'm going to wrap this video up, because we're just driving the message home that these research and comparison buyers or shoppers, prospective buyers, they're not ready to close a transaction with you yet. But this is the sequence. These are the sequences, and sometimes we're doing 2 and 3 and 4 sequences depending on how complex or how many different product divisions you may have in your business. But we're putting these sequences in place that run automatically so that you can then have those long-term messages going out that are going to help increase sales. It's going to help and generate the call to action. You, of course, are going to close the sale in most cases, because they're going to call you and speak to you. But the call to action, so that they're ready, when they're ready to do business, they're going to pick up the phone and do the action that you really want them to take, which is to pick up the phone, call you, and complete the sale transaction with you. So having said that, we're going to go to video number 4 here in the next video, and we're going to talk about ways to track and measure and improve these processes, because none of this is static. Everything changes online. Things are changing all the time with Facebook, with Google, with Bing, search engine algorithms. Websites change, requirements change, everything is changing fast. So it's important that you have great systems in place, a great dashboard, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we do that for our clients so that you can not worry about it. You can do what you do best. You can be the best doctor, lawyer, accountant. You can be the best air conditioning repairman, or along that line. You can be the best at what you do while we take care of monitoring all the data and making the necessary improvements and communicating those to you. So I'll see you back in video 4, where we're going to talk about tracking, measuring, and improving in the entire, to wrap up the process of our blueprint, which is getting found, generating leads, increasing sales, and of course tracking. So I'll see you back in the next video, video number 4.